It's time for this old head to get into some modern metalcore. Will I like it? Stay tuned and see. Welcome, metalheads. I'm the host of Heavy Metal Philosophy and writer for Metal Digest, John Barbas. Make sure you stick around to the end of the episode for this week's Riff of the Week. Every metalhead has blind spots, and recently I've figured out that mine is modern metalcore. Longtime subscribers might remember the episode that I made about the band Currents. Currents is a huge metalcore band, and I'd never heard of them until last year. Doing this show and writing for Metal Digest has forced me to be aware of album releases that I normally wouldn't. Doing research for Metal Digest and getting prepped and getting ideas for this show, I always look ahead at what albums are coming out soon. And last year, I saw that this band Currents was coming out with an album called The Death We Seek. And when I looked into it, I realized, holy shit, this band's got over 1 million monthly Spotify listeners. I thought, how could there be a metal band with that many fans that I've never heard of? Well, sure enough, coming up this week, there's 2 albums dropping from a band called Boundaries and another band called While She Sleeps. Both are metalcore bands and both have a lot of fans and I've never heard of them. Boundaries has over 120,000 monthly Spotify listeners, and While She Sleeps has just under 1 million. So again, here's a metal band with millions of fans that I've never heard of. That confirms it. As a death metal guy, I have a big blind spot when it comes to new metalcore bands, and I plan to remedy that. I mean, if I'm gonna cover metal, then it's only professional that I do my research. It's weird to me too, because it's not like I don't like metalcore. I must have just fallen off after 2010-ish. I mean, when I was a kid, I was a huge fan of Killswitch Engage, Trivium, Parkway Drive. It's just a lot of bands after that era that I don't really know about. So this week I figured I'd listen to a lot of Boundaries and a lot of While She Sleeps. I listened to both of their most recent albums and all of the singles that both bands have released leading up to their releases coming this Friday. And we're going to start with While She Sleeps because, in my opinion, they're the band that's most representative of what I mean when I say modern metalcore. And what do I mean by that? Well, in my opinion, prior to 2010, metalcore was an actual genre. If I told you a band was metalcore, you kind of sort of knew what to expect, but now that label means nothing. I mean, Spirit Box is metalcore, Falling in Reverse is metalcore, and so is Jaluka. And none of those bands sound alike. Meanwhile, you look at death metal and it's got all manner of different subgenres to help differentiate these bands. You've got melodic death metal and blackened death metal and death doom and progressive death metal, where metalcore didn't really get all of these branches. And all these different bands with all these different sounds, they all fall under this huge umbrella called metalcore. I mean, there's deathcore, but that's about it. And that makes the genre name pointless. I mean, it's like calling every metal band rock and roll. And these 2 very different metalcore bands really drive that point home. You take While She Sleeps, to me they sound like the logical progression of bands that come after Linkin Park and Thrice and Architects. To me, While She Sleeps is a much more technical version of Linkin Park. And I know Linkin Park is new metal, but that's exactly what I mean. There's a lot of new metal influence in modern metalcore. I mean, just listen to this. There's a lot of great technical guitar stuff here. You know, Linkin Park had much more basic guitars, but when you listen to the sing-screaming style, it really reminds me of Chester. And then the rap parts, also the cadence of the flow is very similar to Mike Shinoda. You know, there's a lot of really heavy parts that I enjoyed. I mean, really heavy. But for the most part, I think this is more of like a pop rock band. Oh, but Boundaries, on the other hand. Now, this is more the metal that I like. And specifically, this is more the metalcore that I like. This is what metalcore originally was. This is what it started as. This is hardcore kids playing metal. This reminds me of the early days with bands like Converge. This is hard. And I think that now that we've had about a decade of more poppy metalcore bands, kind of like Bring Me the Horizon, we're seeing a resurgence of the more hardcore metalcore. You got bands like Knocked Loose and Jesus Piece and Kubla Khan. Oh, Kubla Khan.
Low tech, to my gate.
These hardcore bands are starting to rise. I mean, we all saw what Knocked Loose did at Coachella. And if that's the way that metalcore is going, then I'm down with it. Let's go. But it's interesting because, we're starting to see some issues when some of the more pop metalcore bands tour with the more hardcore metalcore bands. Last year, We Came as Romans went on tour with Body Snatcher, and one of their shows got halted early by security. From death metal and black metal to metalcore, we're all metalheads here, and there's going to be overlap between all of us, but the different subgenres do have different cultures from each other. And when you've got this more radio-friendly metalcore, the culture, you're going to have more push-style pits at concerts. But then you got these hardcore bands, and you're going to get hardcore dancing, slam, and sometimes even crowd killing.
Don't do this. Please, don't do this. Think of your fans. Think of everybody. You got to kill him now.
So why are both of these bands considered metalcore? It makes no sense to me. Perhaps you can tell me. I need your help. Core kids out there, please help this old head. Enlighten me, I beg you. And while I peruse your magnanimous comments, let's talk about the riff of the week. I really like what I heard from Boundaries, so let's go with their new single, Scars on a Soul, from their upcoming album, Death is Little More. That album will drop this Friday, March the 29th. And if you like brutal metal like that, maybe you want it to go a little more brutal, then you'll love the interview I did on last week's podcast with Brodekin. They're a death metal band who are also trained historians, so all their songs focus on real historical events, and in particular, the medieval time period and torture and executions. So if you find that interesting and you're on YouTube, just click right here. And if you're audio only, links will be in the description, as well as my discount code for Gthic Jewelry. But most importantly, read philosophy, listen to metal. I love you.